When I was a kid, I was lucky enough to have a Railway Series collection book. And this was something that would travel with me everywhere. School, car rides with my family, I tried to keep it close. And what's funny is I didn't really know what I was reading. At the time, I didn't know the difference between the TV series and the Railway series. Honestly, there was a pretty high chance I was just looking at the pictures. One thing would always confuse me though, and that was the characters that would appear only in the Railway series. For example, the Arlesdale Railway, and the miniature engines, which did come around in CGI. But as a kid in the model series, it always confused me how they never popped up. There was one group of stories that encapsulated this and that I would go to before anything though, and that was the stories of the Culdee Fell Railway. Some of, if not the most unique engines in the entire book. Purple narrow-gauge steam engines with slanted boilers that worked on a mountain with faces on the back of their cabs. You really couldn't get more catching if you tried. But at the same time, nothing would confuse me more. I had a wooden railway Culdee, but still would never see Culdee in anything but the books. Now that I'm older, I can understand making models of such would be a very hard task. Even if it was practically possible, it wouldn't be financially possible. Years later, however, when CGI rolls around and we get the Arlesdale Railway, everyone kinda collectively looked at each other like, does this mean what we think it means? And no, it didn't. We never saw the Culdee Fell Railway. They did redesign the wooden model though, so it would look like it was CGI. Thanks. But with how interesting the Culdee Fell was with its engines and stories, it's kind of a shame it never got any recognition. Well, today I'd like to change that and shine a bit of light on the railway that got shadowed out. Of course, starting with what inspired such, and then getting more into the railway itself. So with all of that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let me take you to Snowdon. More specifically, the Snowdon Mountain Railway in Wales. It was 1869 when the idea of a railway to the summit of Snowdon was first brought up. In 1871, a bill was even put before Parliament to help with the purchase of such. This was immediately opposed by the local landowner, however, who thought the railway would spoil the scenery. Oh wow, is that a ew, he was right, how horrible. For 2 decades nothing happened because the landowner wouldn't budge. Well, eventually we roll around to 1893, and the terminus of the North Wales narrow gauge railways was renamed Snowdon, not only affecting the livelihoods of accommodation owners, but also attracting many tourists. After much persuasion, and I imagine a lot of pressure, the landowner would give his consent. And though he still was a principal landowner in the area, he was no major influence in the company. At this point, no act of parliament was required, and the line was entirely on private land obtained by the company itself. Construction finally began between December 1894 and February 1896, with the earthworks about 50% complete in April of 1895. The entire track laying process began from one end. The locomotives that ran on this railway would take advantage of a rack in the middle of the rails, so they had to make sure this was correctly aligned along the entire thing. Over 4 miles of track going straight up a mountain. Despite this, the progress was still rapid. Despite a harsh climate, the first train would reach the summit in January of 1896. But as fencing and signals were not yet ready, the opening was set for Easter. That Easter the line did open, and in anticipation, Colonel Sir Francis Marndine from the Board of Trade made an unofficial inspection of the line on Friday the 27th. This included a demonstration of the automatic brakes, and he declared himself satisfied with the line, but did recommend that wind speed be monitored and recorded, and trains be stopped when the wind was too strong. It was Saturday, April 4th, when a train was being run by a contractor consisting of a locomotive and 2 coaches. On the final section while ascending, the train would hit a boulder that had fallen from the side of a cutting, and several wheels would end up derailing. Thankfully no one was hurt, and quickly the train was put back on the track, but with this being only 2 days away from opening, I'm sure it had nerves pretty high. Sadly, opening day would not go off without a hitch. The railway itself was officially opened on Monday the 6th, and 2 trains were dispatched to the summit. On the first return trip down, possibly due to the weight of the train, locomotive number 1, Lotus, with 2 carriages lost the rack. The entire consist would lose control, and the locomotive derailed and fell down the mountain. Lotus would end up cab over wheels and completely destroyed, with a passenger dying from blood loss after jumping from the moving train. After a miscommunication, the second downward train would actually hit these coaches, though thankfully this time it would result in no fatalities. It was eventually concluded that the accident had been caused by post-construction settlement, or the ground moving after they had finished. Not just this, however, the accident was compounded by excess speeds due to weight. So as a result, the maximum allowed train weight was reduced, with a gripper system also being installed on the railway itself. If you want to hear more about this event specifically, I actually have a video on it which I'll link in the description, but despite these hard opening days, the railway itself, as you can see, prospered. Not just going on to inspire the Culdee Fell, but even now and today. It's one of many railways I hope to visit myself, but aside from that, the reason I've gave you all this information is because it's crucial in understanding the Culdee Fell story. Of course they differ a bit, but as we go on, I think you'll start to see the similarities. The Culdee Fell is the only rack railway on Sodor. The track gauge is 2 feet 7.5 inches, with a line length of about 8 miles, so double Snowdon. The Culdee Fell was the brainchild of the Mid-Sodor, who wanted to encourage tourism in the Peel-Godred district. The Mid-Sodor wanted to extend their line around the head of the valley to Kirkmachen, where passengers could join a mountain railway for the ascent of its peak. But as the extension would have involved expensive engineering works, for a line which only would have worked profitably for half the year, the idea was pretty quickly dropped. The property most severely affected by the scheme was owned by Lord Peter Barron, a man in favor of railways in general, but reluctant to allow a railway to be built up his mountainside view, so for some years this project was thrown to the side. This gave the Skarloey Railway an opportunity they were not slow to seize. They were in a position to provide easy access to a shorter route up the mountain, and saw to it that their Culdee Fell excursions were widely advertised. This became a pretty popular service. Trains would be met at Skarloey Station by wagonettes, which took excursionists up the rest of the way. The short climb with the locomotives, however, proved to be the most popular, and the Skarloey Railway's enterprise had a depressing effect on the people of Peel-Godred and Kirkmachen, who saw their tourist traffic dribbling away to the other side of the island. At length, with woeful complaints aimed at Lord Peter, he finally changed his mind, and thus, in February of 1897, the first sod of Culdee Fell Rack Railway was cut by Lady Elaine, Lord Peter's eldest daughter, at Kirkmachen. The project was sponsored by the Culdee Fell Tramroad and Hotel Company, which had been formed a year before under Lord Peter's chairmanship. The Snowdon Mountain Railway opened shortly before this, and on their advice the About Rack system was adopted. Construction was also greatly helped by Snowdon's expertise. Construction went smoothly, and the line was opened for passenger traffic in March of 1900. It was passed by the inspector from the Board of Trade, after rigorous tests of both operational methods and safety precautions. It was open to the public soon after, and for the first month everything went very well. That is, until on a return journey when number 1, Godred, left the rails at Devil's Back and fell down a ravine. Thankfully, the passengers kept calm and the crew jumped clear. As for Godred, however, who was recovered the next day, he was found so badly damaged he was basically beyond local repair. At this point, rebuilding him was financially out of question, so the remains of Godred were put at the back of Kirkmachen sheds, where for the next few years they provided a useful collection of spare parts for the other engines. It was widely believed that a stone in the rack rail had caused the accident, but this was never proved. As such, the line was closed for the rest of the summer, while stringent measures were taken to eliminate the possibility of a future accident. The Culdee Fell would reopen on Easter Monday of 1901, and despite the occasional minor mishap, there hasn't been another situation like this since, let alone any injury to any passenger. Currently in operation on the Culdee Fell is Ernest, Wilfred, Culdee, Shane Doyney, Patrick, who was formerly Lord Harry, Alaric, and Eric. And of course the ill-fated Godred, who helps keep these 7 going, I guess. And though we never directly saw them in the CGI or TV series, and despite me still having questions like, is the face on the back a separate entity from the one on the front, or do they share a conscience? What's up with that? Hopefully you'll leave this video with a bit more knowledge and a bit more appreciation of the CFR. In my opinion, it definitely deserved it. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe for even more train content. And as always, I want to give a huge shout out to my patrons for making videos like this possible. If you want to join these beautiful people on screen and get early access to videos and projects, that'll be linked in the description. And with all of that being said, thank you guys again for watching, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next one.
Either subscribe, donate, or get the fuck out.